You can see it online. The footage is grainy, a product of its time, but it's clear enough. The man on stage is a ghost of his former self. He's heavy. His face is puffy. The famous black hair is still there, but he looks tired. So incredibly tired. He's wearing one of those elaborate jumpsuits, the kind that had become a uniform, a caricature. This one is light blue, studded with patterns. It looks tight on him, uncomfortable. He walks over to the piano. This is already different. He doesn't usually just sit down and play. He's a frontman, a mover, a force of nature that commands the entire stage. But not tonight. Tonight, he sits. The crowd murmurs. His backing singer, Charlie Hodge, holds the microphone for him. He needs the help. His hands are needed for the piano keys. He begins to play. The chords are simple, steady. Then he starts to sing. His voice is still there. It's that deep, rich baritone. It's a little thicker now, a little heavier, like the rest of him, but it's unmistakable. It's the voice that changed the world. He sings the first few lines, and it's okay. It's good. He's telling a story of loneliness, of waiting, a story of time passing so slowly. But you can see the effort. His eyes are closed tight. Sweat is beading on his forehead almost immediately. This isn't the easy, effortless cool of his youth. This is work. Hard physical work. He's pulling this song out from somewhere deep inside him, and it's taking everything he has. The song builds. The lyrics talk of a desperate need, a hunger for love, and as the emotion in the words grows, so does the strain on his face. He leans into the microphone. Charlie is holding. His body tenses. He's preparing for what's coming. The whole performance is leading to one moment. One huge, explosive release of sound and feeling. When it comes, it's astonishing. He rears his head back, his mouth wide open, and this incredible, powerful high note comes out. Now, it's not a pure, clean falsetto. It's strained, it's raw. It's the sound of a man giving every last ounce of his spirit, every last molecule of air in his lungs. It is the sound of a soul laid bare. He holds it, pushing, fighting to keep it aloft. The veins in his neck stand out. His face is a mask of pure exertion. After that peak, he almost collapses back into the song. He finishes the last few lines, his voice softer now, spent. The piano chords fade out. For a second, there's silence. He looks dazed. He's breathing heavily, sweat dripping down his face. Then the crowd erupts. They know they've seen something special, something real. Charlie gently takes the microphone and helps him stand up. He needs the support. He looks completely drained, a man who just ran a marathon he wasn't trained for. This was in June of 1977, just weeks before he died. Watching it, you have to ask the question. Was that the most difficult song he ever had to perform? It's not a simple question. Difficulty can mean many things. Is a song difficult because of its technical demands? Its vocal range? Its physical requirements? Or is it difficult because of the emotional place the singer has to go to perform it? For this particular song, at this particular time in his life, the answer is all of the above. It was a perfect storm of difficulty, a convergence of a demanding song and a diminished performer that created one of the most compelling and heartbreaking moments in music history. Let's first think about the song itself in a vacuum. Forget who is singing it for a moment. It's a power ballad. A big one. It requires a huge vocal range. It starts low and brooding, but then it climbs. And it keeps climbing until it reaches that massive soaring peak. For a natural baritone, which he was, that top note is a challenge. It sits right at the break in the voice, that uncomfortable place where you have to decide whether to push your chest voice up to its limit or flip into a lighter head voice or falsetto. Many singers would opt for a clean, smooth falsetto, but he never did. That wasn't his style. His style was about power, about emotion, so he pushed. He drove his voice up there with sheer force. That's technically difficult and vocally risky. You could crack. Your voice could give out. It requires immense breath control to sustain a note like that with so much power behind it. You need a strong diaphragm. You need to have conditioned your lungs and vocal cords for that kind of athletic feat. In his prime, he could do it. He had the power, the breath, the technique, but this was not his prime. Now, let's put the singer back into the equation. The man in 1977. This is where the difficulty goes from being a technical challenge to a monumental struggle. His health was failing, and failing badly. This isn't rumor or speculation, it's a sad, documented fact. He was overweight, and this wasn't just a few extra pounds. The excess weight put immense strain on his heart and his lungs. More basic things, like breathing, were harder. Imagine trying to summon the kind of deep, controlled breath needed for a massive power ballad when your body is already struggling to function. The jumpsuit itself, a symbol of his stardom, was now a constricting trap. It was hot under the stage lights, and it was tight. It was another physical obstacle to overcome. And then there was the cocktail of prescription drugs. He was taking a staggering amount of medication for a whole list of ailments, real and perceived. These drugs bloated his body and clouded his mind. They sapped his energy. Some were uppers, some were downers. His system was in a constant state of chemical confusion. The man who sat at that piano was not just tired, he was profoundly unwell, fighting a war inside his own body. So you have a song that requires the breath control of an athlete being sung by a man whose lungs are being crushed by his own weight and whose body is awash in debilitating drugs. That alone makes it an incredibly difficult task. You can see it in the performance, the heaving chest, the desperate gasps for air between phrases, the way he conserves all his energy for the big moments. This wasn't a performance, it was an act of pure will. But the difficulty went even deeper. It was emotional, the song is a plea. It's about a desperate, aching loneliness and a yearning for connection. I need your love. That's the core message. In 1977, was there anyone lonelier than the king of rock and roll? He was surrounded by an entourage, adored by millions, but by all accounts he was deeply, profoundly isolated. His marriage had ended, he was estranged from friends who had tried to warn him about his lifestyle. He was trapped by his own fame, a prisoner in a gilded cage. When he sat at that piano, with no bandstand theatrics, no karate kicks, no scarves to throw to the crowd, he was stripped bare. It was just him, a piano, and a song about needing love. He wasn't just singing the lyrics, he was living them. Every word seemed to come from a place of genuine pain. The strain you see on his face isn't just from the physical effort of hitting a high note. It's the emotional effort of confessing that kind of vulnerability to thousands of people. For a man who had built a career on being the tough, cool, swaggering icon, this was a moment of complete and utter exposure. That kind of honesty is terrifying. It's emotionally exhausting. It's difficult. So, was it the most difficult? To answer that, we have to consider other contenders. What else in his vast catalog pushed him to his limits? In the early days, the difficulty was all physical. Songs like Jailhouse Rock or Hound Dog weren't vocally complex. They were raw, energetic, and relatively simple. The challenge was in the performance, the dancing, the leg shaking, the swiveling hips, the sheer explosive energy he had to project for an entire show. It was a different kind of marathon. It was physically taxing in the way a sporting event is. But he was young then. He was a force of nature, a coiled spring of boundless energy. It was hard work, but his body was more than up to the task. It was what he was built for. Then came the Vegas years. The difficulty shifted. The shows were longer, more professional, more vocally demanding. He was no longer a rock and roll kid. He was an icon, a living legend, and he had to sing songs that lived up to that status. Take an American Trilogy. This was a complex and demanding piece of music. It stitched together 3 different songs from 3 different traditions. It required him to shift his vocal style and emotional tone on a dime. He had to go from a soulful spiritual to a rousing battle hymn. It culminated in a huge, dramatic finish with a full orchestra and choir. It required precision, control, and stamina. Performing Trilogy was like conducting an army with his voice. It was technically and orchestrally difficult. Or consider a gospel song like How Great Thou Art. This was a true test of his vocal power and his spiritual conviction. When he sang gospel, he wasn't just performing, he was testifying. Those songs demanded a different kind of emotional commitment. And the vocal peaks in How Great Thou Art are colossal. He had to summon a sound that was both powerful and reverent, a sound big enough to fill a cathedral. He won a Grammy for his performance of it, and for good reason. It was vocally punishing in the best way possible. And what about My Way? This song became his personal anthem in the later years. Vocally, it's a slow build, a steady crescendo that requires a lot of power at the end. But the real difficulty of My Way was theatrical. He had to sell it. He had to stand center stage and declare to the world that he had lived life on his own terms, with few regrets. In the 1970s, as his life was becoming more complicated and perhaps more filled with regret than he let on, singing that song with conviction must have been an incredible acting challenge. It was an emotionally difficult song because it required him to project an image that was perhaps at odds with his reality. All of these songs were difficult in their own right. An American Trilogy was musically complex. How Great Thou Art was spiritually and vocally immense. My Way was theatrically demanding. They were mountains he had to climb every night on stage, but none of them represent the same kind of battle as that 1977 piano ballad. The key difference is the context. When he sang an American Trilogy in 1972, he was still in command. He was in better shape, more in control of his voice and his life. The song was a mountain, but he was a seasoned climber, fully equipped for the ascent. The same goes for his great gospel performances. They were draining, but they were also uplifting for him. He was channeling a power that energized him. The 1977 performance was different. He was no longer a seasoned climber. He was an injured man trying to scale a cliff face in a storm with broken gear. The difficulty was not just in the mountain itself, but in the condition of the man attempting to climb it. Every note was a struggle against his physical limitations. Every emotion was a fight against his own despair. When he sang "How Great Thou Art," he was channeling God. When he sang this song in 1977, he was channeling his own pain. The vulnerability was off the charts. There was no character to hide behind, no swagger, no grand orchestra to cushion him. It was just him, his voice, and the truth. The fact that he even attempted it is remarkable. He could have chosen an easier song. He could have relied on his incredible charisma to get through the show. He had 1,000 hits he could have sung with half the effort. But he chose this one. He chose to sit down at that piano and pour every last bit of himself into this incredibly demanding song. Why? Maybe he needed to. Maybe in that moment it was the only song that could express the things he was feeling. Maybe it was an act of defiance, a refusal to go quietly, a way of showing the world and himself that even under all the layers of sickness and sadness, the artist was still there. The voice was still there. The heart was still there. He was proving he could still climb the mountain, even if it cost him everything. Watching the footage, you see the cost. The performance is not technically perfect. His voice cracks a little, his piano playing is basic, a vocal purist might find flaws, but perfection is not the point. The point is the struggle. The beauty of that performance is in its imperfection. It's in the strain, the sweat, the raw, ragged emotion. It's a document of a great artist fighting. Fighting against his body, fighting against his despair, fighting against time itself. So we come back to the question, was it his most difficult performance? If difficulty is measured by the gap between what a song demands and what the singer has left to give, then the answer is almost certainly yes. On that night in 1977, that song demanded everything, and he gave it. He had very little left in the tank, but he emptied it completely for those few minutes on stage. Other songs were hard, but this was different. This was a battle for survival played out in a song. It was the story of his final chapter, condensed into 4 minutes of music. The loneliness, the pain, the fading power, and the incredible, stubborn, beautiful spark that refused to be extinguished. It's difficult to watch, but it's impossible to look away, because it's real. It's the most brutally honest performance he ever gave. The song was Unchained Melody.